Hello, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order here this afternoon, and welcome to meeting number 122 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Pursuant to the order of reference on Wednesday, November 22nd, 2023, the committee is resuming its consideration of Bill C-316, an act to amend the Canadian Heritage Act, the Court Challenges Program. Now, avoid audio feedback, I think we all know, but before we would begin, I would like to ask all members to consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent the audio feedback. Take note of the following preventive measures in place to protect the health and safety of participants. Only use the black approved earpiece. The former grey ones are no longer in use. Keep your earpiece, as always, away from the microphones. And when you're not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the sticker placed on the table for this purpose. And thank you then for your cooperation. So today we're going to do Bill 316, an act to amend the Canadian Heritage Act, CCP. We welcome back our witnesses from the Department of Canadian Heritage who are available once again to answer our questions on clause by clause. Blair McMurran, the Director General, welcome back again, Mr. McMurran. And for the first time, Ms. Labbe, the Manager of Human Rights, welcome to the committee. Clause by clause, we will resume debate on the supplemental of Ms. Rachel Thomas to the amendment of G2. So that's where we're going to pick it up today. Ms. Thomas, if you don't mind leading us off on G2, the sub-amendment to G2.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the floor. Just before I get to that, I do wish to give notice of a motion that I'll be tabling here at committee. It shouldn't come as a surprise. On Sunday, we had a historic event take place, and that was Game 6 between the Edmonton Oilers and the Dallas Stars. And of course, the winning team goes on to compete for the Stanley Cup, which is quite a great achievement. That winning team was the Edmonton Oilers, the Canadian team that will represent us as we go for that cup. Should we be successful, it will be the first in more than 30 years, the first time in more than 30 years, which is quite exciting. Canadians tuned into the CBC in hopes that they would be able to watch the game there, but unfortunately were not able to because it was not made available. It's a public broadcaster, it's paid for with tax money, and so, of course, for Canadians to be forced to subscribe in order to be able to access that game seemed altogether inappropriate. The motion that I'm giving notice of reads as follows. Given that the CBC receives $1.4 billion from taxpayers, the CBC holds the rights to broadcast the NHL playoffs. The CBC chose not to broadcast the Edmonton Oilers game that sent them to the Stanley Cup finals. The committee calls on the CBC to commit to broadcasting all Stanley Cup final games and report this finding to the House. This motion is now on notice at committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Thomas. Just move on to G2. Okay, we're going to stay with you on the sub-amendment, as I said earlier, to G2.
Perfect.
And you're up.
Perfect. Awesome. So where we left off last day, I understand, is with regards to a sub-amendment being moved here, having to do with Clause 3, replacing lines 26 to 28. I believe I already read it into the record, but just to do it again, we would insert "and financial performance of the program," as well as a list of all the cases that received funding and the amount provided for each case. It would end there. And that, of course, would be inserted into the G3? Sorry, G2 as amended. And the reason for this is we want a list of all cases, which therefore creates greater accountability and transparency. And we want to know the amount of money provided to each of those cases because, again, that provides greater accountability and transparency. These were things that numerous witnesses called for around the Court Challenges program, wanting to see a greater degree of accountability being achieved, wanting to see greater transparency with the Canadian public in terms of how tax dollars are used with regard to funding cases or not funding cases, because of course there are others that are ex-nade. And so I would be seeking the support of committee members in order to make sure that this is accomplished.
Thank you, Ms. Coteau. Mr. Coteau.
So, yes. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
I just wanted to come to your
I get
party
Michelle
tonight.
and Miss Coteau. That's fine. To the officials, what is the purpose of holding back some of those details in which the sub-amendment would reveal? Is there a reason for it? And I believe you addressed some of this the last meeting, so maybe you can just really take a minute to explain.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. The current practice of the modernized program, as we've attempted to explain at different moments, but the executive director of the program also explained, I think, during her testimony, is to try to achieve a balance between transparency on the one hand and respect of what you could describe as litigation privilege or solicitor-client privilege, and simply personal privacy and security and safety on the other of end recipients of the program funding. So for that reason, the specific amounts and the names of recipients are not published in any format currently. What's envisioned once cases reach the end, once they've exhausted all avenues of appeal, is a publication of the case names and the outcomes of those cases.
Are there cases, through you, Mr. Chair, are there cases where the information is revealed because there's agreement that it's of the public interest to provide that information?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Currently, that's not the practice. It would be at the discretion of an end recipient of program funding to reveal that kind of information, but currently it is not disclosed through the reporting of the modernized program or through the contribution agreement that governs it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, Michael, we're going to move to Mr. Shampoo.
Très rapidement, Monsieur le Président, sur cette...
Very quickly, Mr. Chair, on this Conservative sub-amendment, just to remind everyone around the table, we had lots of time. We talked about this at large during the previous meeting, and I thought that we were ready to vote. I thought we were pretty clear and that we had asked all our questions. I'm ready to move to a vote unless somebody else has questions.
See if there's any more questions. Seeing none, we'll have the vote on the sub-amendment of G2 by Ms. Thomas.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
No.
Mr. Coteau. No. Ms. Gainey.
No.
Madame Latanzio.
No.
Monsieur Serré.
No.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes.
Monsieur Gould.
Oui.
Mr. Tolmie.
Yes.
Monsieur Shampoo.
Oui.
Ms. Ashton.
No.
Yes pour 4-4, nays contre 6-6.
Okay, the sub-amendment is defeated. So now we'll go to the amendment itself, G2. Just a reminder, if G2 is amended and adopted, right? So BQ4, CPC 6, and NDP 2 then cannot be moved due to a line conflict. Okay, any discussion on G2 then? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Oui.
Mr. Coteau.
Oui.
Madame Escaney.
Oui.
Madame Latanzio.
Yes.
Monsieur Serré.
Oui.
Ms. Thomas.
No.
Monsieur Gourde.
No.
Mr. Tomey.
No.
Monsieur Champoux.
Non.
Miss Ashton.
Yes.
Yes pour 6-6, nays contre 4-4.
Okay, so G2 is adopted. BQ4 was also in that. I'm very sorry. It was cannot be moved due to a line conflict. So now we go to BQ5, I believe. We had it crossed off. So originally I had 5 crossed off and not 4, but it is BQ5 where we're going right now. And so if BQ5 is adopted, I'm just going to say once again, CPC 6 cannot be moved due to a line conflict. Mr. Champoux, did you want to speak to BQ5?
Monsieur le Président, je pense que
Mr. Chair, I think colleagues understand BQ5. We're talking about transparency and accountability and the possibility to do a fair analysis of the way the program is managed. We're not trying to have information or private information, but we want more information on how the program is managed. I'll stop there because I would like for us to move quickly to the vote, but if colleagues have questions, of course.
Any questions on BQ5? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
No.
Mr. Coteau.
No.
Ms. Gainey.
No.
Madame Latanzio.
No.
Monsieur Serré.
No.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes.
Monsieur Gourde.
Oui.
Mr. Tomey.
Yes.
Monsieur Champoux.
oui.
Miss Ashton.
No.
Yes pour 4-4, nays contre 6-6.
It's defeated. We'll move on now to BQ6. Again, Mr. Champoux, if you've got a few seconds.
Certainement, dans ma liste, j'avais
I think I had CPC 6 on my list before BQ6, but if you would like for me to move to BQ6, I can.
C6. No, we just did 5, BQ5.
No.
Did we not? We just did BQ5.
But before that, we did CPC 6.
Yeah, sub-amendment. We did your sub-amendment, G2 sub-amendment. And then we went to G2. And then we went to BQ5. And now I'm moving down to, because we're just, yeah. Because of G2, we had BQ4, BQ5, CPC 6, and NDP 2 that couldn't be moved to a line conflict. So we're at BQ 6 on page 16. Mr. Champoux, quickly.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. BQ6 is again seeks to have more transparency without going into details that would identify those that make the requests. We want more transparency on the number of cases that were denied funding. And so we would like to amend by adding the following, 511. The annual report shall also state for each of the program's 2 components the number of cases that were denied funding.
Thank you, Mr. Serré. You have a comment?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Oui, je sais qu'on peut regarder.
Mr. Serré, I believe that we can vote on BQ6, but I believe that you may have skipped CPC 6, and NPD 2, NDP 2. I just wanted to know if we would get back to it.
J'étais pas clair là, que vous avez dit, Monsieur le Président.
You weren't clear, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to be sure. Please clarify again.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oui, il y avait un conflit de ligne entre G2.
There would have been a line conflict between G2 and the two amendments that you mentioned. That's why we've moved on.
Okay, BQ6. Any other comments on B26? Seeing none, I'm going to call for the vote, please.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Sorry, we just want to try to get some clarification on something before we go to the vote. We needed to get some clarification because ordering now. So I'm going to ask for just a minute. If we can suspend for just a minute.
Suspend for a second then. Resume, and we're back on BQ number 6. Mr. Noor Mohammed, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are in principle in support of this. There is a sub-amendment that we would like to make to this. I've asked the team to give me the language, which reads as follows. Basically, everything would stay the same. However, you see that it says, where it says the number of cases, that the word cases be replaced by the word applications.
Any comments on the sub-amendment? Ms. Thomas?
Sure, I wouldn't mind just understanding from the officials the significance of this change.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would observe that changing the language in that way would make it consistent with the current practice of the program. At the moment, it's already possible to calculate. It would be possible to calculate this this statistic, this figure, if you were talking about applications as opposed to funded cases. The annual report of the program currently publishes the number of applications received and the number of applications funded, as opposed to cases. Like an application generally pertains to a case, but you could potentially have multiple applications for the same case. So what is published is the number of discrete applications received.
We'll move on to Shampoo.
C'est bon, Monsieur le Président. Je pense que Monsieur
I think that Mr. McMurrin answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the sub-amendment? Seeing none, I'm going to call for the vote then on the sub-amendment by Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Oui.
Mr. Coteau.
Oui.
Ms. Gainey.
Oui.
Madame Latanzio.
Oui.
Monsieur Serré.
Oui.
Ms. Thomas.
So sorry, so we're just voting on the sub-amendment, correct?
Sub-amendment, yes.
Yes.
We're voting on applications instead of cases.
Thank you.
Okay.
No.
Monsieur Gould.
No.
Mr. Tolmie.
No.
Monsieur Champoux.
Oui.
Ms. Ashton.
Yes.
Yeas pour, 7-7, nays contre, 3-3.
So the sub-amendment to BQ6 has carried. Now we go to there. BQ6 as amendment. Do I call for the vote on that? Yeah, call for the vote on the BQ6 as amended.
All right, the vote is on BQ6 as amended. Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Yes.
Mr. Coteau.
Yes.
Ms. Gainey.
Yes.
Madame Latanzio.
Oui.
Monsieur Seri.
Oui.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes.
Monsieur Gourde.
Oui.
Mr. Tolmie.
Oui.
Monsieur Champoux.
Oui.
Ms. Ashton.
Yes.
Yeas pour 10-10.
So we have BQ6 as amended carry. Shall clause 3 as amended carry? Ms. Ashton, I think your mouse has the hand on the corner there. You can see. Is that?
That's ours.
Oh, that's yours? Okay.
No, it's
That's ours. Sorry about it. I keep thinking you have your hand up. There is a hand there, but it's not yours. So there's your Tuesday chuckle. See, I'm watching the monitor. Okay. We're here now at shall clause 3 as amended carry? That's the question. She said no, so we're going to ask for a vote.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Oui.
Mr. Coteau.
Oui.
Ms. Gainey. Oui. Madame Latanzio.
Oui.
Monsieur Seri.
Oui.
Ms. Thomas.
No.
Monsieur Gourde.
No.
Mr. Tolmie.
No.
Mr. Champoux.
Oui.
Ms. Ashton.
Yes.
Yeas pour 7-7. Nays contre 3-3.
Okay, that carries. Shall clause 4 carry? Mr. Surrey?
J'aimerais demander,
I would like to ask a question to the officials. Clause 4, and we're looking at legal documents here with C13 that was adopted last year, and with the process that we're going through with 316, I would like to ask for clarification from our officials. Is it necessary with 316 to have clause 4? I'm not sure if it's necessary to have it because we've already done this with C13. I would like to ask for the officials to clarify if we need clause 4.
Okay, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a potential issue with clause 4, especially near the end. Perhaps previous versions, programs did not have an appropriate authority. The goal is to anchor this program into the Department of Canadian Heritage Act and to have a new paragraph. But the government and ministers at the time had the authority to establish the program back then.
Good point, but our perspective is that duly elected governments and ministers of the day had the authority under, among other things, the Department of Canadian Heritage Act to establish former iterations of the Court Challenges program. And the transitional provision here could give the unintended suggestion that there was no authority previously to establish the program, when in fact there was. it's suggesting that it's anchored in the new paragraph 5A1 of the Act, when in fact there was legislative authority previously for previous governments and ministers to establish the program. So on va juste éviter une mauvaise suggestion.
So indeed, this could be an issue, but this is our legal perspective. Mr. Chair and the clerk, with the comments that we've just received, do we need to vote, or should we say that we don't need clause 4? What's the process here?
Ou on vote contre? Je suis pas certain.
Can we remove it, or do we have to vote against?
Mr. Mella, here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Monsieur Serré, si la disposition n'est plus nécessaire, il faut...
If it is no longer needed, you need to vote against it.
As that is the will of the committee, we'll have a vote then to eliminate. No, Mr. Shampoo?
Attendez un petit peu, Monsieur le Président.
Just a moment, please, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask Mr. Mela if we remove clause 4, we in BQ7 wanted to have a new clause 4.1. Would 4.1 then also be rejected at the same time?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Monsieur Champoux, l'article 4 et l'article 4.
Clause 4 and 4.1 are different, so there wouldn't be an impact on 4.1.
Shall clause 4 carry, is what I'm asking. So I'll ask for a quick vote on this. Shall clause 4 carry?
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
No.
Mr. Coteau. No. Ms. Gainey. No. Madame Latanzio.
No.
Mr. Serré.
No.
Ms. Thomas.
No.
Monsieur Gould.
No.
Mr. Tolmie.
No.
Mr. Champoux.
Non.
Ms. Ashton.
No.
Nays contre, 10-10.
Thank you. We'll move on to the new clause then, 4.1, which is BQ number 7. Mr. Shampoo, we're at BQ 7, new clause 4.1.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Bien content d'ajouter une toute nouvelle clause, un tout nouvel.
Thank you. I'm happy to add a new clause to this bill. It's a clause that is important, considering that Quebec makes different choices from the rest of Canada. And so the Bloc's proposal is a serious one. And I would like to invite my colleagues to think about it. It would allow us to solve an issue regarding Quebec's identity, and as we know, this Court Challenges program would have an impact on decisions made by Quebec's National Assembly, and so it seems relevant to adopt Clause 4.1. And so it proposes that the Minister of Canadian Heritage shall enter into a framework agreement with the Government of Quebec for the purpose of making an arrangement respecting the management of any program established under paragraph 5A1 of the Department of Canadian Heritage Act. I know that this is an ambitious request, but if we think about it objectively, we could all recognize that this proposal would recognize Quebec's distinct character. That is where the motivation comes from for BQ7, and I hope everyone will vote in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Serré.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. BQ7 requires a framework agreement with the Government of Quebec for the Court Challenges program. Mr. Chair, through you to the clerk, I'm not sure which motion it was, but it was inadmissible because the bill cannot apply to one specific province. It has to apply to Canada as a whole. And so I would like to know if other amendments were inadmissible, would that not be the same case here because we're talking about a national program? I would like clarification.
Mr. Mella.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oui, Monsieur Serré.
Yes. In this case, it's a little different. We're asking that the minister enter into a framework agreement with the government of Quebec. So it's not linked to the bill, but rather to arrangements that can be made outside of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask Mr. McMurrin, if we do things like this with such a program, are we creating a precedent? What would the impact be if we negotiate with a province rather? Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment would add an administrative complexity. It could have an impact on service delivery in a timely manner and on access to the program. Point of order, please. I would like, and with all due respect for Mr. McMurrin, I believe, and I'm trying to think of the word. I think that we're extrapolating a little bit. We're talking about a framework agreement. I think it's premature to say that this would complicate the implementation of the legislation and accessibility to the program. I think he's extrapolating here. And with all due respect to Mr. McMurrin, I know that we're talking about Mr. Serré's question, but I think that a framework agreement would help with our concerns. And we can't say here that it would make the process more complicated. Thank you.
Ray, are you done? And then I'm going to move on here.
La chance à M. McLaren de finir sa réponse, mais
Can Mr. McMurrin finish what he was saying? But yes, it will add an administrative burden that could cause delays for the process, and it's relative. But, and with all due respect to Mr. Champoux, I would like to allow Mr. McMurrin to finish what he was saying. If we have to negotiate with a province, and negotiating can take time and can have a negative impact on applicants, I think it's quite relative. And I would like to hear Mr. McMurrin's comments.
Okay. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand the goal behind the amendment, but we are wondering if it might add a bit of an administrative burden, and this would have an impact on the timeliness of this service, but also access to this service by minority communities in Quebec.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question will be directed to Mr. McMurrin. We understood that this needs to be an independent organization, an independent program. So the question basically is the following, is that would this amendment not go against the program's nature and objectives to be subservient to the will of any province, whether it be Quebec or any other province, in your opinion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I suppose I wonder if I would characterize it as being subservient to a certain province. I think we're more concerned with simply the timely administration of the program. And as I mentioned, the potential obstacles that could create to different minority communities in Quebecois jurisdiction accessing the program. That would be more our concern, I think, than what was being discussed, Mr. Chair.
So if the impediment would be on an administrative level, would it still not be regarded as a negative or a problem, if I can address it as such, in incorporating this language?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to confess it's a question I hadn't thought about from exactly this perspective. We're well aware that different provinces, like different jurisdictions, have perspectives on the program and their own interests in terms of the laws, policies, and programs they implement in their jurisdictions. We don't consider that to be untoward, Mr. Chair, that there are these different perspectives. I think our concern, just to restate myself at the end of the day, would be more around the administrative impacts and the potential impacts on access within a particular jurisdiction where this kind of agreement was required in order to deliver the program in that jurisdiction, like to deliver funding to recipients in that jurisdiction.
Mr. Champeau.
Monsieur le Président, je trouve ça vraiment...
Mr. Chair, I'm hearing that we're concerned that there might be delays in accessing the program. Quebec is a nation. Quebec has legal traditions that are different from the rest of Canada. We're not only talking about regional differences. It has legal traditions that are unique to Quebec. And jurisdictions that the National Assembly of Quebec are responsible for. We believe that this is a good program if it is well administered, and if it reaches the appropriate clients. We don't want to keep people from having access to this program. We want people to have access to these courts and to challenge discriminatory legislation, but in the case of Quebec, it would be relevant to negotiate. The Heritage Minister and the Government of Quebec could negotiate and say, this belongs, or this is a matter of Quebec jurisdiction. And once this discussion is done, there's no reason why it would delay timely access to the program. I just want to recognize, because the House of Commons has recognized, that Quebec is a nation with values that are different, legal traditions that are different, and we believe that a program like this one that has an impact on the different jurisdictional matters, well, it's not a wild idea that there be an agreement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Your comments on BQ7 as discussed. Seeing none, I'll call for the vote.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
No.
Mr. Coteau.
No.
Ms. Gainey. No. Madame Latanzio.
No.
Monsieur Serré.
No.
Ms. Thomas.
No.
Monsieur Gourde.
No.
Mr. Tolmie.
No.
Monsieur Champoux.
Oui.
Ms. Ashton.
Oui.
Yes pour, 2, nays contre, 8, 8.
Q7 is defeated. Shall the short title carry? Yes? Okay, so we move on now to BQ8. Mr. Champoux, I'm going to have you move this first, and then I'll have some words to say on this. Okay? Can you move your BQ8 first?
Alors, je dépose BQ8, Monsieur le Président.
I propose BQ8, and I will wait for your comments before I comment.
Thank you very much. So the amendment seeks to make a substantive modification by adding new elements to the preamble. As the House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, states on page 774, in the case of a bill that has been referred to committee after second reading, a substantive amendment to the preamble is admissible only if it is rendered necessary by amendments made to the bill. So in the opinion of the chair, the proposed amendment is substantive and therefore is inadmissible. That's the ruling on BQ8. Well, I'm not tough, but that's BQ9. Again, I need you to move this.
The setup.
J'ai l'impression de marcher vers l'échafaud. Alors, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, I proudly move BQ9 that recognizes French as the official language in Quebec. You have the floor, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. The amendment seeks to make a substantive modification by adding new elements to the preamble as the House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, again on page 774. In the case of the bill that has been referred to committee after second reading, suspense, good. So in the opinion of the chair, the proposed amendment is substantive and therefore is inadmissible. And now we're going to G3. Okay, so G3, I will turn it over to Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to amend, I would like to bring this forward as amendment to G3, if I might. And I would like to amend the following, that Bill C-316, the preamble, be amended by replacing lines 13 and 14 on page 1 with the following. Quote, whereas it is of utmost importance that it be possible to bring before the courts test cases of, and then it continues.
It says here, if asked, the amendment is admissible.
Perfect.
Since G1 was adopted. Ms. Thomas.
Sure. To the officials, through you, Chair, I would just ask, so what this does is it deletes, for Canadians. So whereas it is of utmost importance for Canadians that it be possible to bring before the court test cases of national significance, et cetera, et cetera. And so taking out Canadians, what is the significance of that? What does it do?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment would explicitly clarify that access to funding through the Court Challenges Program is not limited to legal citizens, like Canadians. The basis of the modernized program is in effectively charter rights that apply to everyone in Canada, including non-permanent residents and other classes of people, regardless of their citizenship status. Some charter rights do apply only to legal citizens, like the right to vote and the right to enter and leave the country, but the rights covered by the modernized program apply to all people in Canada, and this amendment would seek to reflect that, given that the program's eligibility tracks with that situation.
Ms. Thomas, go ahead. I think that could have been a quorum call. It wasn't a vote. It could have been a quorum call because the lights are off. So go ahead, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. So certainly charter rights apply to those that are citizens and non-citizens alike. The Court Challenges Program is money put aside from Canadian taxpayers essentially then used to challenge the government of Canada, and rulings that are made there. And so potentially then what this would do is it would say that non-citizens then have the right to access those Canadian tax funds that have been put aside for the Court Challenges program to then challenge the Canadian government with regards to decisions that it has made. Is that not correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what I would respond is that given the nature of charter rights, this amendment would sort of align the way the program works with the charter it's based on. Eligibility for the program is based on certain of the charter rights, and given that they apply regardless of citizenship status, we just would observe that the reference to Canadians here might not be completely appropriate, possibly misleading. Maybe that's too strong, but not apposite, we would think.
Again, through the chair, though, the Court Challenges program has nothing to do with whether or not the charter applies to citizens or non-citizens. The Court Challenges program has to do with how taxpayer money is used to pay for cases.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I would respond that applications are taken in, like received and considered by the program based on the charter rights that are being invoked by the applicants. And given that those apply regardless of citizenship status, it's effectively how the program runs. I take the point in terms of public funds and Canadian taxpayers, but a decision has been made to establish a program on the basis of charter rights that apply a certain way to all people in Canada.
So in your estimation then, through the chair, removing Canadians then does what? Like, does it actually change the way that the program functions right now?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given that we're talking about the preamble, I do not believe it would affect how the program is run. It would just align the language of the preamble with the eligibility criteria of the program effectively.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Saray.
Yeah, just quickly, Chair. This is a very minor amendment that's being proposed that really reflects how the program is being operated today. So organizations are not citizens. So basically, this is just making the preamble a bit more relevant or consistent, as was just described here, to what the program is actually doing today. So, and it's obviously based on the charter rights. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Mr. Surrey took the words right out of my mouth, so I will cede my time back to you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Shampoo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Clarification, Mr. McMurran. Can you tell me what the proportion is of applications sent in by citizens or individuals versus the number of applications by organizations and groups? We can confirm with annual reports, but to my knowledge, we don't have access to that kind of detailed data. And so if we make this change with G3, we don't know how many people this could apply to. Because I agree that an organization is not an individual. But that said, I think it raises a relevant question. There's this program to challenge Canadian legislation, and it would be open to people who are not Canadian citizens. I think it's relevant to ask questions. And so I would like to know what the ratio is. How many applicants are organizations and how many are individuals in the Court Challenges program? but you're saying we don't have access to this data. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I could add that we could examine the cases that have been closed because that information would have been published.
All right, seeing no more, I'm going to ask the question, should G3 carry? No, so we'll call for a vote on this.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, are we voting on the as amended? G3 as amended, correct?
You're right, it should be as amended, right? Because he did amendment. No amendment?
Sorry,
No.
so was mine?
No, we're just
Okay, fine.
on
Sorry,
G3.
sorry,
Sorry
yes,
to
okay.
leave. Go ahead. So we're going to vote on G3.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Yes.
Mr. Coteau.
Oui.
Ms. Gainey.
Oui.
Madame Latanzio.
Oui.
Monsieur Serry.
Oui.
Ms. Thomas.
No.
Monsieur Gould.
No.
Mr. Tolmie.
No.
Monsieur Champoux.
Non.
Ms. Ashton.
Yes.
Yeas pour 6-6, nays contre 4-4.
G3 carries. We now go to the NDP 3. Ms. Ashton, I'll ask you to move this, and then unfortunately I'm going to have a couple of comments to say. So I do need you to move it first.
Okay, I can definitely move it and also predict what you might say, but only to say that for us in the NDP, it has been important for this for the court challenges program. To be able to expand to include cases based on the Canadian Human Rights Act, something that we heard from multiple witnesses and is critical to the work that we need to do in our country to advance everyone's human rights.
Thank you very much. I can read out the chair's decision here. The amendment seeks, suspense. So the last line, the opinion of the chair, proposed amendment is substantive and therefore is inadmissible. We'll go to BQ number 10, and Mr. Champoux, almost the same thing. I need you to move it. And yeah, I'm not going to be your big friend here today, but I can see why I'm in the chair, though. Go ahead.
Monsieur le Président, je vais prendre mon temps.
Mr. Chair, I'll take my time. I'll read the amendment to give you the time to reflect on your decision. BQ 10 is an amendment that we wanted to move to add to the preamble and recognize English and French in Quebec, but we can move to your decision. The predominant use of English. Your harsh rulings are really throwing me off, Mr. Chair. So we're talking about French is a minority language in Canada.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, in the opinion of the chair, proposed amendment is substantive. Therefore, it's inadmissible. And I'll give you one more shot at BQ 11. And unfortunately, we're the same result, but I'm going to have you move BQ 11.
Ah ben, Monsieur le Président, vous me remplissez d'espoir.
You're filling me with hope by giving me an additional chance. BQ 11, I imagine, will meet the same fate. And I wanted to recognize Quebec as a nation and the fact that French is the only official language in Quebec. And Mr. Chair, I see you coming.
Yes, unfortunately, BQ 11, chair's ruling. It is the opinion of the chair. Proposed amendment is substantive and therefore inadmissible. So we're down to the short strokes here, ladies and gentlemen. Shall the preamble carry? No, would have to call for a vote then on the preamble.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Yes.
Mr. Coteau.
Yes.
Ms. Gainey.
Yes.
Madame Latanzio.
Oui.
Monsieur Serry.
Oui.
Ms. Thomas,
No.
Monsieur Gourde,
No.
Mr. Tolmie,
No.
Monsieur Champoux,
Oui.
Ms. Ashton.
Yes.
Yeas pour 7-7, nays contre 3-3.
Okay, so the preamble carries. Shall the title carry? Yes? On division? Shall the bill as amended carry? On division? Shall the chair report the bill as amended to the House? Yes? On division? Shall the committee order a reprint of the bill as amended for the use of the House of Commons at report stage? Yes? Done. Okay, thank you. Well, no.
You got other
See?
business?
Other business. We believe Mr. Noor Mohammed was going to move something.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, officials. You're free to go. Thank you, Mr. McMurrin. And Ms. Labbe, thank you for sitting in for the last 56 minutes. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, fully recognizing that there is a desire on the part of the committee to get Safe Sport 354 done, as well as to do the online harm study, I would propose that with respect, with the review of Bill C-354 and other matters before the committee be scheduled as follows: that June 6th be dedicated to the first hour to review the Safe Sport draft, second hour sponsors appearance on 354. June 11th, witnesses. June 11th, 13th, witnesses on online harms. June 18th, witnesses for C-354, and that the deadline for amendments on 354 be at noon on that date, and that June 20th we go to clause by clause on 354, so that we can at least get those three things done.
Okay, so just recapping, June 6th would be the Safe Sport and 354. June 11th, online harms, both hours. June 18th, 354. And the amendments then, and June 20th, we would have 354. Any conversation?
No, this looks like a great plan.
We got a plan. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, go ahead.
Give us 1 minute just to verify.
Yeah.
Just suspend for.
Yeah, we'll
for 1 minute.
suspend for 30 seconds. You take a look at it. And then Ms. Ashton. You're fine?
It looks reasonable. We're good.
Okay, Ms. Ashton, your hand is up. The real hand is up.
Yes, exactly. Sure. Our concern, we have some sort of thoughts on how things could be done perhaps more effectively. Our concern is pushing 354 until the very end. I understand it does have to be back in the House by the end of September. I think it might be more prudent to switch out maybe even one of the online harms sessions to move 354 up, and then we could do online harms later. I know sometimes we don't always sit until the very end of the House sitting, and so in the hopes of finishing 354 before we leave and in time for September, I'm wondering if folks might consider that.
Yes, 354 has to be done by September 27th, Friday. Any discussion on this? I see none. Do I call for a vote then? What is the procedure with this? We should vote on.
Amendment,
So I guess, Ms. Ashton, you'd be moving an amendment to what has been brought out as a schedule. Yeah, okay. We can do that. We'll vote on Ms. Ashton's comments on 354, especially for June 20th, that we may not be here and that we need to get this.
Ask her if she's moving it, though.
Are you moving it, Ms. Ashton? Or is it
Sure.
just for discussion?
Well, I mean, I whatever's more effective. I'll move it. You know, I don't know, folks. I mean, basically, it's based on the premise of us possibly not sitting on the 20th. So why we would leave clause by clause until the very last meeting we may not sit at, when it has to be in right when we get back, is a bit of a concern for me. So I'm fine to move it.
I guess we would need a clarification where you would want 354 to move. If not June 20th.
Well, I'm suggesting bumping it up. So one of the online harms could then move to the 20th in case we're still sitting, or into the fall. So I understand, you know, we wouldn't have the witnesses right away for June 11th. So we could leave online harms there. We could do safe sport, whatever. But if folks want to move with online harms, that's fine. But moving 354 to June 13th, and then June 18th, making it clause by clause, and then June 20th would be online harms, or, you know, whatever.
Thoughts? Ms. Thomas, then?
Okay. Sorry, with all due respect, an amendment doesn't end with "or whatever." If Ms. Ashton wants to move an amendment, then she has the ability to do that. But if she's just wishing to have a loosey-goosey conversation, then that's something you do offline. So I don't hear an amendment, therefore I don't see a need for vote, except for the motion as moved by Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms.
I guess maybe the loosey-goosey, we could take out the whatever. I just think it's not very prudent for parliamentarians to commit to a June 20th clause by clause when it's likely we're not going to be sitting. So if we're going to be loosey-goosey, that's the way to do it. My proposal is that we move 354 to take over the two previous meetings. So ending clause by clause on June 18th, and June 20th could be online harms.
Yeah, I think Mr. Mella wants to know on June 13th, is that the deadline for the amendments on June 13th on 354 then? We're running over here, so we gotta, it would be? Okay. What is the will of the committee in front of me because of time restraints? Ms. Ashton, I think you're going to get defeated here. Everyone kind of agrees with the Liberals on this one. So thank you, though, for bringing it up, because 354 has to be reported to the House by September 27th. So thank you. I need someone to move to adjourn. Yeah, okay, Ms. Thomas?
Just to make sure, you do need to take a vote on the motion. As moved by
yes,
Talib.
that's right. So could we have a vote on Mr. Noor Mohammed's scheduled that he has brought out here starting on, I think, June 6th with the safe sport and going to 354. Okay? And the rest of the 11th, the 13th, the 18th, and the 20th.
The vote is on the motion of Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Yeah.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Yes.
Mr. Coteau.
Yes.
Ms. Gainey.
Yes.
Madame Latanzio.
Oui.
Monsieur Serré.
Oui.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes.
Monsieur Gourde.
Oui.
Mr. Tolmie.
Yes.
Monsieur Champoux.
Oui.
Ms. Ashton.
No.
Yeas pour 9, nays contre 1.
Okay, motion carried then. Thank you. And any to adjourn? Okay. Thank you.